Hello, I'm Sharon Tong. You're watching In Parliament. Parliament wrapped up 5 days of debate on the presidential address today. Summing up, MP for Sengkang West and Government Parliamentary Committee Chairman for Health, Dr. Lam Pin Min, says the debate has lived up to his request for candid discussion. He said the quality of debate was robust, constructive and even heart and mind lifting. Speeches over the last 5 days touched on popular topics like reviewing healthcare policies for an ageing population, affordable housing, accessible transport, the need to reform Singapore's education system, as well as an inclusive economic growth.
My fellow honourable colleagues in the House, PAP or otherwise, have stated clearly the passionate causes which they will be championing during their term. Let us all leave this session of Parliament remembering that building a better life for all Singaporeans means not only waxing lyrical about policies and legislations, but turning words into actions that can benefit Singaporeans of all segments of society, including the marginalised.
The final day also saw more ministers taking part in the debate. Several of them stood up to defend the government's position following opposition MP Lau Tia Kiang's speech. The MP for Aljunied GRC said the government should thank opposition parties for allowing Singaporeans to exercise their right to vote and express their views. He also commended various ministries for becoming more responsive to issues on the ground. This sparked off debate in the House that he was claiming credit for the positive changes after the recent general election.
The opposition parties have also enabled the government to awaken to the problems on the ground that it had thought were manageable. Though the political system is not a level playing field for opposition parties, the political will and majority of the voters mitigated this unfair system.
In what way does he think that the field is not level for the opposition party?
Simply put it, that the GRC system is something which has not given the opposition a level playing field.
Mr. Lau, in his address earlier, basically claimed credits for everything, all the positive changes that have taken place since the general election. Let's not be politicians and just keep worrying about votes. I think let us be political leaders, worrying about the future of Singapore. Let us put Singaporean first, put Singapore first, not PAP first, not Workers' Party first.
On the contrary, sir, I actually commented the PAP's resilience in response to the ground reaction after the election. And I say this augurs well for Singapore. I have not claimed any credit that the Workers' Party has made the PAP do that. And who should really claim the credit? Probably the voters.
Education Minister Heng Swee Keat says to succeed in the global arena, Singaporeans must be aware of the relationship between Singapore and the world. He says Singaporeans must understand that its success lies in being relevant to the world, so its citizens must stay open to learning and find ways to be different and unique. But at the same time, Mr. Heng believes society cannot afford to breed an us versus them mentality. He says a caring society and rugged individuals must go hand in hand, and called on Singaporeans to give back to the broader society and not forget who they owe their success to.
An excessive focus on the individual, his rights, his needs, his wants, his aspirations, his achievements, will ultimately be detrimental both to the individual as well as to society. Such a person is self-absorbed and self-centered. He attributes his achievements to his own brilliance or diligence. Let us promote a spirit of giving and make voluntarism, philanthropy, corporate social responsibility and social enterprises a way of life, a part of the Singaporean DNA.
The price and supply of rice will remain stable despite the severe floods in Thailand. Minister of State for Trade and Industry Lee Yih-hsien says most of Thailand's rice fields were not affected by floodwaters, and the presence of alternative sources and Singapore's small import volume means rice can easily be purchased from other countries like India. Responding to a question from MP for West Coast GRC Foo Mee Ha, Mr. Lee said while Singapore has no control over global prices, the government has in place several measures to mitigate sharp price spikes and supply disruptions.
There is no panic in the market because this industry of supply has got many baffles in each of the supply chain. So for instance, we have our own stockpile. Other countries do. And even the supplier themselves or the intermediary themselves keep a healthy stock level in terms of supply.
Law and Foreign Affairs Minister K. Shanmugam says the case involving 2 Singaporean women who were made to do nude squats when at a Johor detention centre would have to be resolved in accordance with Malaysian laws. Mr. Shanmugam, who was replying to a question in Parliament about the case, acknowledged the concerns Singaporeans have over the treatment of the 2 women. He says on 9th September, the Malaysian High Commission in Singapore informed his ministry that a thorough investigation of the case had been completed, but a report has yet to be finalised. But he gave the assurance that his ministry will continue to press them for the official investigation report.
So this incident should not have an impact on the overall bilateral relationships between Malaysia and Singapore. I will take this opportunity to remind Singaporeans travelling to Malaysia, and in particular those travelling to Johor by road, to always check and ensure that their passports are stamped at entry and exit by the Malaysian immigration authorities.
The National Council on Problem Gambling is expanding its services to include not just counselling but also financial and credit services. In an update to Parliament today, Acting Community Development Minister Chan Chun Sing said his ministry is monitoring casino advertisements to ensure they do not glamorise gaming. Latest figures show that as of 30th September, 29,000 people have applied to ban themselves from the 2 casinos, up from 18,000 as of June. And between January and August, nearly 570 gamblers sought help for their addictions, nearly double the number from 2008.
We are concerned with this issue with or without the casinos, because even before the advent of the casinos, we already have 1 to 2% in terms of pathological or problem gambling. We watch this very closely, and we want to continue to ensure that we have a situation that we can manage on our hands.
But the Home Affairs Ministry says it's still too early to tell if there is a link between the opening of the 2 casinos and trends in unlicensed money lending. But the Second Minister for Home Affairs, S. Iswaran, says the government is tracking this closely. Mr. Iswaran says unlicensed money lending and harassment reports dropped by more than 20% in the first 9 months of this year compared to the same period last year. And this can be attributed to tougher laws and stepped-up police enforcement. Mr. Iswaran says there is also a comprehensive effort to educate children who may be used by loan sharks in their activities.
Most of the time they're involved in the distribution of things like name cards, pamphlets and flyers advertising easy loans for loan sharks. They were generally ignorant of their involvement in illegal activity and were enticed by the opportunity to make easy money. I think, notwithstanding that, we need to send a strong message to the youth, first of all, that there are serious consequences to be involved in such activity.
Turning to the elderly, the Ministry of Community Development, Youth and Sport says more can be done to enhance home-based care for them. An integrated home care model has been piloted to serve this group with multiple care needs. MCYS says it also recognises the importance of training foreign domestic workers to help families cope with the demands of caregiving.
MCYS and MOH are currently studying the provision of home-based social and health care needs for our frail elderly, with a view to promoting ageing in place, right-siting of care, and a more seamless transition from the hospitals to the community and the home.
Health Minister Gan Kim Yong says working Singaporeans withdrew some $130 million from their MediSave accounts last year to pay for their parents' healthcare expenses. He says this is 18% of the total amount withdrawn from MediSave accounts in 2010. Replying to a question from non-constituency MP Gerald Giam, Mr. Gan says while the government will do its best to provide assistance to those who need it most, individuals also have to play their part in staying healthy.
At the individual level, each one of us must take personal responsibility for our health. And we also have to take our personal responsibility to save up for rainy days, in case one day we'll fall ill. Mutual support in the family will provide a second line of defense. And this is part and parcel of our family values.
And MP for Marine Parade GRC Tin Pei Ling made her maiden speech appealing for help for both the old and the young. Ms. Tin has urged the government to consider providing free basic healthcare to elderly Singaporeans in the public healthcare setting. She said elderly issues are close to her heart as 1 in 3 residents in her McPherson ward are aged over 50 years. On the youth, Ms. Tin says while young people know that earlier generations have done a lot of good for Singapore, they also want to forge their own paths ahead.
The government and society need not overreact to the loud and sometimes strident debate, especially on the internet. Sure, there should be guiding principles and even a code of conduct, but robust debate or even disagreement on issues shows that young Singaporeans are genuinely concerned about the future of Singapore, our Singapore. We should let things take their natural course. Young people will gradually figure out for ourselves the way forward by trying out new ideas and working out which sacred cows can be slayed, and ultimately pushing out the boundaries of what Singapore can become.
By early next year, the average waiting time for a child to be enrolled into an early intervention centre will be halved from 6 months to 3. The Ministry of Community Development, Youth and Sports has expanded capacity at its 14 early intervention centres. It will also be opening more centres and hiring more staff. The number of preschool children diagnosed with disabilities and developmental delays has almost doubled in the past 5 years, from 1,300 in 2005 to 2,500 in 2010.
In recent years, there has been increasing awareness amongst parents on disability and developmental delays. At the same time, the MOH Child Development Program, or CDP for short, has enhanced their capability and capacity on detection and diagnosis at a younger age. Together, these factors have contributed to more children and younger children seeking intervention services.
Ang Mo Kio GRC MP Dr. Intan Azura Mokhtar says more can be done to redistribute resources to neighbourhood schools, particularly to normal technical classes. She urged the Ministry of Education to ensure that those teaching normal technical students in mainstream schools be specially trained in areas such as motivational and counselling skills. Relating her experience and feedback from other teachers, Dr. Intan said teachers of normal technical students are usually overwhelmed by the amount and skill required of them.
I hope that normal technical classes in mainstream schools can be made somewhat smaller. More specially trained teachers can be deployed to these classes, while more relevant courses and programs, such as computer graphic animation or digital music, for instance, can be introduced to them, so that we can maximize their potential during their school years. This is pretty much like what we did for the gifted education program back then. If you could do it for the top end of the academic stream, why not for the other end?
Replying, Senior Parliamentary Secretary for Education Hawazi Daipi says the ministry has already been doing more for normal technical students. He said there will soon be 2 more new specialised schools for these students.
In calculating teacher quota, for example, we give consideration to schools with more normal course students by providing additional manpower grants and an additional head of department for NT for schools with larger normal technical enrollment. In tandem with curriculum demands, we have provided more teachers too. For example, subjects such as computer application, design and technology, which require closer supervision, are taught in groups of 20.
And women was the focus of Senior Minister of State Grace Fu's speech. She urged the government to rethink policies for single mothers and mothers who want to re-enter the workforce. She noted that many hesitate to go back to work due to the lack of confidence or relevant skills.
We need companies to offer transition arrangement, such as part-time work, internship for mature workers perhaps, to help transit women into the fast-paced job that they were used to. Job matching programs targeted specifically at women should be encouraged.
Parliament has been adjourned to a date to be fixed. Good night.